Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and we're going to be looking at the correction that we are currently experiencing. If you guys like the content, please subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out the Telegram channel, which you can find a link to in the description below. Let's go ahead and jump in. So we've been trying to give out warnings for a while now saying, it's if you don't own Bitcoin, of course, you can always buy it whenever you want to. This is not financial advice. But if you're looking to be on the side of smart money, and you don't want to come in when it's overextended by so much, then you might consider taking a different approach to the markets. The first thing we'll do is we're going to look at the BLX. It shows the price is 38,000. We know that in fact it's less than 33,000 as at the time that I'm making this video. The reason it shows 38 is simply because it just shows the closing price. So we've dropped by about $5,000 since closing yesterday, and at the bottom we were all the way down close to around 30K. So if you're new to this space, the general idea is, and if it may seem like Bitcoin is this, extremely mysterious thing that when you buy it, it just goes down. However, if you find yourself being that person that's always coming in at these major blow off tops, okay, or even shorter term bubbles, and like the one we may be in now, we're not sure yet. We could pick back right up, we could pick up right where we left off and continue higher in a few days. We simply do not know. But if you find yourself being the type of person that comes in only when it captures your attention in the media, then I would say, it might be time to take a step back and say, okay, well, what are you doing wrong? How can you fix it? Well, the general idea is when the market is down and when it's relatively quiet in the market, so in this region here, in this region, these are our accumulation windows before Bitcoin goes to its new paradigm. So this was the new paradigm, this was the new paradigm, the new paradigm, and so far we haven't reached it this cycle. We could reach it, but we haven't reached it quite yet. And then we had another accumulation phase, which was more or less broken up. We had it in this region, and then we had a short-term bubble in 2019. And then we had another accumulation phase. Bitcoin was nice enough to grace us with another accumulation phase. And so far, we've moved substantially up to the peak logarithmic regression curve, but we in fact have not made it yet, and we're not sure how long it'll take us to make it there, or if we'll ever make it there. Of course, I think we'll make it there eventually, but it begs the question, how long will it take us? Now, one of the things we can do is we can zoom in and look at overextension from the fair value regression line. And you can see that from the fair value, we reached around 244% over the fair value line. And the fair value line is just fit to quote unquote non-bubble data. Now, the reason for this is not to say that this correction is going to necessarily take us back down a lot more, though it could. It's not to say that it can't go up more, but it could. It's just to warn people that if you're the type of person that finds yourself constantly coming in when it's only in the news, like when it's all over the media, then you have to recognize that the people you're fighting against are the people that were buying in the bear market. Okay, and these people that were buying in these regions, they're already up maybe 10x or more at this point. So it might seem like, well, why is the price going down? Why is the price going down? $40,000 still seems cheap. But in fact, to these people, to the people that bought at say 3K to 4K, they're up more than 10x. And a lot of us believe that Bitcoin will go to six figures this market cycle, give or take, right? Give or take. A lot of us believe it will go to six figures this market cycle, but that doesn't mean that none of us want to try and capitalize on where we think corrections could occur. Now, the hard part is knowing exactly when they will occur. And the idea behind it is in the same manner that you dynamically or that you get you dynamically DCA your cells. You don't have to do it dynamically like me, but if you put in say a token amount of a fiat into Bitcoin say every week or every month, and you're doing it in this region, no one thinks twice about that. But then when you think about the reverse, when you think about selling, a lot of people think that they are, they have this ability, this uncanny ability to time the top. And it's just simply not true. We just don't know where the top is. And so that's why I say, in the same way that we DCA into the market, you can also DCA your sells out. And that doesn't mean you necessarily need to have it leave crypto. You could put it in a different coin. For instance, I talked a lot about I did take a little bit of Bitcoin off the table right here. And you guys know that. I talked about it. I put it in Ethereum at the time. This was on the premium list into the cryptoverse.com. I put it into Ethereum because the market cap risk was still relatively low. And I think that was pretty apparent at the time, right? Bitcoin was moving significantly. A lot of the other coins were not. So I put these cells of Bitcoin into Ethereum. And then Ethereum did quite well over the last few weeks. I also took a little bit off the table in the 20K region, and I also put those into Ethereum. Some of the more recent sells for me just went straight to fiat. And the reason is because the entire market is just getting very far extended. And it's not to say, right? It's not to say that we can't continue higher. Bitcoin has a way of shaking people out from time to time and continuing to go higher. And if it does, it just means I'll continue to scale my sales up in the same way that when I'm buying I'm buying less here than in this region. So the idea is dynamically DCA your buys and sells, meaning you're buying a little bit in these regions, but if it ever gives you this type of opportunity, you want to capitalize on that. And one of the things, if you're new to the space, to keep an eye on is in fact the 200-week moving average. So let me see if I can pull it up on this one. So let's pull up the 200-week. We're going to switch this over to the weekly time frame. So the reason the 200-week is important is, well, historically, it's been our support. Even in the last bull market or the last bear market, it was our support. And when you find yourself in this region, the market is generally scared. However, we also recognize that this, historically speaking, is a great time to really scale into Bitcoin, because if you have done it in the history of Bitcoin's life, this one only goes back to here because of not having enough data. But if you put a ton of money into Bitcoin when it was at the 200-week moving average, it tends to work out relatively well. For instance, if you put it in let's say you didn't even get the wick, but you got it at the 200-week, from that bottom to top, you were looking at over 700%. Now the 200-week right now is at 82.57, and of course, there's no guarantee we are going back down to that level anytime soon. But at the same time, never say never, right? Never say never. Operating in these markets in a deterministic way is how a lot of people lose a lot of money, in the same way they lost a lot of money in 2017 because they just knew it was going to go to 25K, or they knew it was going to go to 30K or 40K or 50K, and it just simply never did. And at first, you get these types of corrections where it comes back down and it comes back up, and you say, oh yeah, we're gonna keep going up just like we have in the past, because we've had corrections in the past. We've had corrections and we always went back up. But then it doesn't, and you get that dead cat bounce, or so it's called, and you ultimately keep trending down. And one of the things we've talked about before, and we talked about this in the video yesterday, which was labeled by FUD by a lot of people, is just generally the Bitcoin bull market support band. And the reason we talk about this is because even in a bull market, you can experience relatively healthy corrections. And as we've shown, a lot of them will bottom around the bull market support band, which is a combination of the 20-week SMA and the 21-week EMA. But we've had 30 to 40% corrections to this level before. And in fact, at the peak, to get back down to it, it was a 50% correction, and we did not hold it. When we don't hold it on the weekly time frame, it's generally the bad news bears, and you enter into a bear market. From here, you enter into your accumulation phase, where you're more or less just moving around this bull market support band. You're moving around it, and if you fail to hold it, you're essentially kicking the can down the road. In this last cycle, we kicked the can down the road approximately 6 months, from here to here, from test to test, about 154 days, which is about 6 months, and then from test to test again, or so, it was 184 days. If you want to say this was the test, it was 147 days. So we've seen what happens when we don't hold the 20-week moving average. It's generally not good. Well, where is it today? Well, the reason why I was labeled as FUD yesterday is because I mentioned where these values are, And again, we're not saying we're going to go there necessarily. It's just something to keep an eye on. So currently, we just had a weekly close. Currently, the 20-week SMA is actually at 18,150, and the 21-week EMA is at 20,562. So we're not even close to these values right now. In fact, in order for us to have reached those values from the peak where they are now, it would correspond to a 56% drop to get to the 20-week SMA and a 51% drop to get to the 21-week EMA, which actually resembles what we saw here. Okay? However, you have to consider the fact that if Bitcoin does drop to those levels, it's not like it necessarily will just drop straight to those levels tomorrow. If it does drop to these moving averages, it could take it a few weeks. And if it does take a few weeks, these things will keep moving up and they'll start to level off as they meet the price, something like that. And if that were to happen, then we could see them meeting, well above their current levels. So it just depends on exactly what the price of Bitcoin does. Now, one thing we have to consider, like any time with Bitcoin, is that this could just be, and we're not sure yet, it could just be simply another shakeout before continuing higher. When you're looking at it, when you're in it, it's always hard to know exactly where you are, right? It's always hard to know. We've had corrections before. I don't believe since we got this run started in October, I don't believe we've had a 28% correction. I mean, we've had a 16%. Here we had a 20%. We have not had anything close to 30% until most recently. And you see how being the smart money into the market, if you've been following the channel for the last year or so, year or two, you realize just how much you were at an advantage for having accumulated Bitcoin in this region. Because even if you're not selling, even if you don't want to sell Bitcoin at this point in time, you're not necessarily buying up at these levels, or if you are, your cost basis is still so much lower that you simply do not care about 30% drops. You're in it for the long haul, and you're in it to see this new paradigm shift in the price of Bitcoin that might not happen fully in 2021. I've said before, I think this cycle is going to be a lot longer than the prior cycle. A lot of people make me out to be a bear because I say that. In fact, I think I'm more bullish because I think this bull market could last for a long time, at least until we get to the new paradigm shift. However, in the meantime, because this path to this new paradigm shift, because it could take it could take a couple more years for all we know. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to hold the 20-week moving average the entire step of the way. During the last cycle we did, and there's certainly a chance that we hold it this cycle. This is the bull market support band, but we also have to recognize that if you're looking over, say, a multi-year time frame, there could be times where we are significantly above it for a while and then dip back below it for a little bit. People are able to reaccumulate, and then we continue to go higher. If you look at this cycle so far, we talked about the 20-week being important. We failed to hold it here, and we went down. We watched it happen. We failed to hold it here, and it went down, and we watched it happen. And we said, this is a huge accumulation period for not only Bitcoin, but also stocks. And then we came up, and we blasted through. We held it as support. We came up, we came over, back down, and held it as support for 6 weeks. And we said that if we hold it as support, the sentiment of the market can change on a dime. Did I think we were going to go to 42,000? Absolutely not. I had no idea that Bitcoin was about to scale all the way up to $42,000. An interesting thing that I was looking at, and this is just an interesting little tidbit, is the peak back in 2019 was around 14K. And if you look at these 2-week candles, these are 2-week candles, I thought this was interesting. The bottom of this wick is at 28K, and the top is at 42. So as they say, maybe 42 is the answer to everything, as we sort of joked about a couple days ago. But the interesting thing about that is that the bottom of this 2-week candle right now is 2x the 2019 peak, and the top of this candle, the top of the wick anyways, is 3x, okay? Because we know that 14 times 2 is 28, and then 14 times 3 is 42. Okay, so 2x and 3x. And we know at the same time, right? We know that we're pragmatic about things. We look at this chart and say, on a 2-week chart, we're still doing quite well. In fact, if someone just presented you with this chart and asked you, okay, well, where's Bitcoin? You would say, oh, well, it looks like it's doing pretty well. We know that right now we're looking at the BLX, so it shows it at 38. In fact, we know it's currently at 32,947. Therefore, it would currently be around this level. So we know that if you were to look at this chart today, it looks pretty bullish. However, there's other ways in which you can look at this chart just to always keep a perspective off on things. If you only listen to the people that are telling you it's going to go up forever, they have a way of disappearing when it stops going up. So if we look at this on a linear time scale, and that's okay to do occasionally. We're not trying to compare it to prior moves where it wouldn't really make sense. But if you just look at it on a linear scale, you can see that it does resemble a bubble. It does resemble a bubble, and I don't feel like it's fair to necessarily say that this in no way is not some form of a bubble. It probably would look more so on this chart where we actually can see the current price. So if we zoom out and let's go ahead and hide this moving average, there definitely are remnants of a bubble there, of course. And I think I might even have the chart. So this is what the main stages of a bubble look like. Okay, so you have takeoff or sell-off, media attention, enthusiasm, greed, delusion, new paradigm, denial, and then the return to normal, fear, capitulation, and despair. Now we look at this and we say, well, I mean, maybe this is the first sell-off. I mean, it's not like it necessarily is going to follow it to the letter. Maybe this was the first sell-off where we went from 12K back down to 10K and where we tested our bull market support band. And maybe that was our first sell-off. And then we go into this media phase, new paradigm shift, right? Everyone's saying this time is different and that it's going to keep going up and keep going up. And then you reach it, and then all of a sudden we look around and people are selling at 42K and no one wants to buy it, right? And then people start selling and it comes down quickly. And then you see something like this. So my philosophy, as I've said before, is simply to never let a good bubble go to waste. Like, never let it go to waste. And that's why I set stops along the way. That way, if it comes back down in the middle of the night, I can wake up, go to the exchange, and see that, you know what? Yes, I still own a decent amount of my Bitcoin, but I was able to profit on it on the way up. And it brings into light a different type of euphoria. If you're feeling euphoric as it goes up, and then you're selling along the way, and then when it comes back down, you can also somewhat feel euphoric if you were actually selling, because then you go look at your bank account and you say, oh, like I put this amount of money into crypto 12 months ago and now it's up 10x or something, or now I've withdrawn, it went up 10x and I've taken out 5x of that, so I've gotten my money back and more, and yet I still have 5x in there to keep sitting in case this move continues, and maybe this is a short-term shakeout. But if it's not a short-term shakeout and we continue coming back down, this money that I have in my bank account, guess where it's going? Right back in, right? Right back in. And of course, you have to consider tax implications. There are ways to trade crypto within the confines of an IRA. It also depends on what country you live in, how long you've been holding. Obviously, long-term capital gains, paying that is a lot better than short-term capital gains. And also it also depends on your income level. So regardless, I don't know, again, I don't claim to know where the top is. I don't claim to know where the bottom is. I just want people to have a level head as we navigate this market cycle, because there are going to be phases like this where it gets really heated and people go crazy over Bitcoin and it comes back down a little. And the problem is that, coming back down to 32K in the grand scheme at this point is not really that big of a deal. I mean, if you think about it, we were at 32K a whole week ago. I mean, a week ago we were at 32K. So in the grand scheme, going back to 32K is not really that big of a deal. Where it would become a bigger deal is if we are not able to recover and continue moving up. If in fact we see the downward pressure, the downward sell pressure continue to take effect, then we could see this come much further down. And if it does, then the people that got in up here fell incredibly trapped. Okay, they're going to feel very trapped, and they're not going to really know how to handle it because they got in at essentially the worst possible time. But as I said before, Bitcoin probably will bail these people out eventually. Maybe tomorrow, maybe next week, maybe in 6 months, maybe in a year. I don't really know, but it probably will bail them out eventually, just like it bailed out the people that bought in at 20K, and so on and so forth. So again, on this channel, we take a more pragmatic look at the market. One of the things you can also do is if we were to take, say, a bar pattern from this point, or yeah, not this point. If we were to take a bar pattern from the bottom over here to the peak, we saw a turnaround point at around this phase, okay? So during the last cycle, we saw a turnaround point around this level where we had a pretty significant correction, but we ultimately continue the trend higher. Now, ultimately, I actually think that this market cycle will not stay ahead of the last one. You guys know my thoughts on that. I've gotten a lot of people criticizing me on that point, but I don't think it will continue to keep pace. If it does, I would be truly impressed. But regardless, if it were to come back down and do something like this, it's not that big of a deal. Right? It's not that big of a deal. We just want to make sure if that does happen, we hold the line at the bull market support band. If we don't hold the line, which there's a possibility that we don't, if we were to come back down, if we don't hold the line, it essentially means that we could be getting yet another huge opportunity to buy Bitcoin within the fair value logarithmic regression band. I told people many times when we were over here over the last year or so, we're going to get to this point, we're going to look back and wish we bought more. If we come back down to this level, which I'm not saying we will eventually, right? I mean, this is a monotonically increasing function, so I imagine eventually we'll catch it. If not this year or this month, maybe later this year, or 2022, 2023, 2024, eventually we will get back down to it. When we find ourselves in the regression band, recognize it for the opportunity that it is. I do not worry about these little bunny hills I did worry about this one, but I do not worry about these little bunny hills in here. It's just accumulation, accumulation, accumulation. We're not getting out of bed for small moves. We get out of bed for that, right? It's worth getting out of bed for that. So hopefully this video has been informative. If you guys like the content, please subscribe to the channel. Give the video a thumbs up. We try to focus on being the smart money here, not being the dumb money. It doesn't mean we can time the top or time the bottom, but it does mean that buying in here, stopping buying at some point, not to say that it can't go up, but just to say it's not worth the risk, right? I want to put my money elsewhere where it's not so risky. And then if it starts to continue to go up, maybe sell a little bit and ensure the profits so that you live to fight another day. We'll see where we go. We'll see if this is a continued correction back down to the 20-week, or if this is a shakeout and we continue higher. Even if it were to play out like a textbook bubble, it might imply a dead cat bounce back up to, back up. But I think that, while it could happen, right, it depends on the time scale you're looking at for a dead cat bounce. On a daily time or a weekly time frame, of course, we're nowhere even close to that. We would have to come back down and then maybe bounce back up later and then continue coming back down. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Let's get to 90,000 subscribers. Give the video a thumbs up. Turn on the alerts. Remember, we do have the premium list at intothecryptoverse.com if you want to know how I'm navigating these markets. Subscribe, and I'll see you next time.